Hey guys, this is Chris from the DSX Machina with our March Kickstarter update, and obviously we've got a doozer because I have the final proof of Amethyst Factions for 5th edition. So things are going to move pretty steadily. I have everything done, content index. This is the final proof. There's a few little tweaks on the graphical layout which I'll go through and point them out. But this is basically, we're only going to do one more pass through, and then I'll be doing bookmarks for the PDF and so forth. At the same time, I'm all the way up to at the end of chapter 10 for all the other rules, and I should be able to burn through the other two chapters for the other game systems, 13th Age 4th Edition and Pathfinder, probably by the end of the week. Only because I'm going to be out of town. Otherwise, it would definitely be this week. It does take a little bit of time to do the contents and index, but that could mean then that these books could generally be done. PDF could be done as early as mid to early next week. So we are wrapping up the large portion of the Kickstarter. As today, I always make this caveat that the Fate World, the Fate edition and the Savage World Edition, which are adapted by Chris Stilson, are entirely kind of separate from my obligation. So once he finishes those, we'll do the layout on those, and then we'll get those out as soon as possible. But for everyone else that are focused on the other 4 versions of the game, the version that I work on from 5th edition, 4th edition, Pathfinder, and 13th Age, those should be out by next week. I'm not gonna say that the Kickstarter will be over, because obviously we have 2 more books after that. But I will be able to finally work on other projects. So I'm going to do a quick walkthrough. I'm not showing my face because I'm not really presentable today because I am going out of town. But this is going to be a quick walkthrough of Amethyst Factions for 5th edition. The first thing we see on the left is the cover, and then the inside cover right after that. I'm going to go through that. The inside there, I got some credits and the contents page. There we go. And we can see the page count. Page count is 454 pages. That is a lot. If I were to say, grab Amethyst Compendium, it is 454 pages. So we are quite literally the same size as Amethyst Compendium, which is the big 4th edition book, and I think that's the largest one. I think Quintessence is slightly smaller than that. So you can see all the chapters here, all the way through there. We have their module. We have our 50-some monsters. I think there's like 55 new monsters, so we see over 50. Chapter 1, which is mostly story and some quick background. It's the shortest chapter. Here's chapter 2, which is light, which is kind of the stuff for Machina. So we have new sub-races, new life paths to choose from for each of the primary races from the original book. Some of them are, I've added in the ladders from Ultra Modern, so we see every race has a new ladder to choose from. Some of them have new sub-races, some of them have new archetypes, that we can see here with the Neros, with the archetype, the Neros Kugata. Pegas, we go into detail on them. And eventually we'll go into the Oni, which is the new race, and then we have illustrations on the new Oni race, and they're the new big race. Although they're actually one of 2 races, but they're the only new positive. Were chaos-inspired race. We still have another one coming up in the next chapter after this. And a little bit of story text. We do the same thing. All the story text is new. It's from the second book, not from the first book. So you're not going to see a continuation of Aiden's Way. Everything's going to seem a bit disjointed, but that's kind of the point. If you want to know the whole story, you'll have to pick up the books. Many of you guys already have the books. So, chapter 3, Darkness, dealing with I wouldn't say the forces of evil, but they are kind of classed as being evil. But this goes into a lot of detail regarding the way that the game is, the way the setting works, the mechanics of the setting, and some pretty heavy concepts, actually. Then we go into the second new race, which is the Shimajaza, or the demons, as we call them, but they're not really demons. We have a whole bunch of backgrounds, as well as not 1, not 2, but 3 types of magic, 3 arcane schools, including the Neverborns, which we see here. There's an older illustration for a Neverborn, and there is the newer illustration of a Neverborn. And we have stats on how to create a Neverborn with a base Neverborn in there. I think that would be 55 monsters, because that Neverborn is technically a monster. Some more story text. So we go into Saints. Saints are a Tekken species. I guess they have a race as well. So I guess 3 races, actually. Never mind, 3 races. In the book, 1 light, 1 dark, and 1 Tekken. And then they have same backgrounds, and then we have new weapons. We have a whole bunch of new weapons. These are all high-tech, really high-tech weapons, like Tesla towers and other cool lasers and death rays and so forth. There's very much a kind of 50s retro aesthetic, which we decided to embrace with the Saints. They're very colorful, so the weapons are kind of a little bit on the goofy side, which I kind of really like. We have power armor, so they have a whole bunch of armor. They're really heavy armor. We play with some rules, so they actually have multiple limbs, which is kind of cool. And we have vehicles, 4 vehicles, 2 aircraft, and 2 spaceships. Now, people are going to ask, why we don't have more of a decent system for dealing with spaceship combat, because these are stats that are entered in here more or less just for trivia, just for the heck of it. I really don't expect these to actually be used in combat per se. They're just there for comparison, and some illustrations on that. Magic is a relatively big chapter because it deals with foundation spells finally. Going into... This is one that's going to see a lot of distinctions between each edition, because some of them will have alternate powers, like 13th edition, 4th edition. But in Pathfinder and 5th edition, we take existing spells and basically define what these spells do. So we're not actually adding any new rules here. So this is one of the few situations where the 13th edition, 4th edition are actually have more content. And here we skip through it. We just showcase the spells. Here's the history of the spells and go through them. But there's only one that actually has a lot of additional rules, and that's Gate, because Gate's kind of a big spell in Amethyst. But in 13th Age and 4th edition, you'll see actually a lot more content. Magical Tradition, so once again we have some more subclasses or prestige classes. In the Pathfinder version, these are actually prestige classes, so you'll see stats on those. New magical artifacts, both one of the bad ones, and we have 2 new Amethyst artifacts. So I think we're up to 4 or 5 now, I think. And then we have some traditional magical items. Yeah. I just realized it's supposed to be in... Oh, I guess I was supposed to have an illustration. I think I took it out to fit the... I should put it back. Oh, it might be back in on the other ones. So this is a new map. This is actually what map that Chris Dilson did. This is a much more accurate map. We actually go into the fluff to detail why the maps changed slightly. This is a more accurate map. This is split, so the reason why you see the carryover in the middle is because in a book, this is the spine, and when you fold it open, these sections will be kind of hard to see. So that's why we have this kind of bleed over. But that's only for... as we go into here, we actually do focus on the individual sections. So this is Chapter 6, the Heartland, which is the central area of Canem. We decided to split them into 3 chapters because it's 175 pages of fluff and setting. There's a lot of these story segments, these little parchments. You'll see them everywhere. So it is if you like fluff and lore, that's really majority. I mean, it's of the 454 page book, 175 pages is just fluff and lore. So I hope you like reading, and I try to make it not very dry. So that's why we break it up with all these little fragment sections. And Tekken Atolls. And then the next one is the East section. So we go into the East, and we have the East section right there. And then we have these zoomed sections, which you'll see a lot. And you see these zooms a lot, just because there's so much detail. Like, there's no way you can see all the detail on these maps, so we created zoomed up areas so you can see even more detail, like right here and then right there. Great illustration, Uzu. And a whole bunch of detail in Baruch Melcut. Big sections of Baruch Melcut. A lot of fluff in Baruch Melcut. And OGM, a whole bunch of there's more stuff there, and then that ends that chapter. And then finally we have 8, which is the west of Canem, so that's the west side of Canem. And lots of cool illustrations on that, more zoomed up maps. A new illustration on Lodinia. The previous one, we've actually had 3 illustrations on Lodinia. One done by an artist who I don't employ anymore, and then Nick did a really good external image, and we want to do a city shot for this book, so we have a city shot there. So more maps there, big section, big story segment there, and more nations and so forth, and that ends with there's Selmana, which took a while to do that illustration right. And we end that chapter. And of course, we're still not done because now we're opening up South America. So before, we had only kind of glossed over North America in the first book. So we go into a lot of detail into that, but then we open up South America. Now, South America had been detailed in the very first D20 Amethyst book back in 2008, 11 years now. However, this game, this is the kind of the canon. So there's everything from that setting is here, but we do play with some of it a little bit. So you'll notice here that this doesn't reach all the way. So that's one of those graphical elements that we'll be fixing. So there's South America, and once again, a lot of zoomed up portions, lots of cool artwork, a lot more detail in the setting. This one's also a pretty big chapter, as you'll obviously notice. Radio, I love that. That's really nice. So I don't do the art, so I can praise it. A new bastion. We have a new there's one bastion. There wasn't a bastion in South America before. We put one in, Novo. So Novo is the new bastion of South America. There's only one there. And then the atolls. Although there are Tekken atolls, we go into details on those. And that big section on the Tenebrae Empire of Vakai and Vanaka. And that ends that chapter. I actually realized there's another mistake I'd have to fix. And so now we're into monsters. And I showed off monsters before, so we won't go into huge detail. I will say that making the monsters for the other systems was quite tricky, because you want to maintain the theme of how they do their monsters. Now, 5th edition monsters are pretty easy. 4th edition monsters are really easy. 13th age monsters are supremely easy. And Pathfinder, there's a very good reason why I state that I probably won't do another Pathfinder book, at least the core Pathfinder book, because the monster creation is just so tedious. The previous Amethyst book took me a month to do the monsters because it was so hard to focus. I really kind of forced myself to do it, and I got it done in 2 weeks. 13th Age took me 3 days. But there's less monsters in certain areas. So with 5th edition, we have an Ancient Holy Dragon, Adult Holy Dragon, a Young Holy Dragon, and a Holy Dragon Wormling, where 13th Age, you're just seeing a huge, a large, and a medium. So we don't have all 4. But that's, once again, kind of, it's in the theme of how they do their monsters. Oddly enough, the page counts aren't too different. I mean, the 13th Age version is only like maybe 2 or 3 pages shorter. So we have a whole bunch. So we have the Adult Holy Dragon, the Noble Dragon, and we have the Guardian Dragons. So we'll skip through these really quickly. The Vampires, Kairos, who's not going to be explained in this book. His stats are here, but we won't really explain who he is. But he obviously does look familiar. The Kythics, Nerissa, we've got a lot of stuff on them. So we'll skip through this quickly. If you want more detail on these guys, watch the other video. Then we skip over to the new chapter. Look at that illustration. Isn't that is so Amethyst? It's like, that's so Raven. This is so Amethyst. It's just really perfectly encapsulates. That's one of 2 illustrations I think really focus on what Amethyst is. I love that. That's a great illustration. So this is Life Path. So we did this in Ultra Modern, and I have this cute little disclaimer right here. So talking about the fact that 5th edition D&D, official D&D 5th edition, has a life path system similar to this, but I tell like it is. I know perfectly well that I created Ultramodern's life path system well before they did, and I fully admit that mine is based off of Cyberpunk 2020's life path system, which is, I think, one of the best life path systems ever made, and this is a variation heavily inspired by that system. I acknowledge where I got it from. I wish they would do the same, but they didn't. Because they didn't ever create... There's never been a life path system for D&D ever like this. And it wasn't until after Ultramodern came out that they suddenly incorporated that into their own system. And I fully admit where I got mine from. So it's a big system. You can roll every year. It's obviously very similar to Ultramodern, but we've made some changes. Then we go into the history, how to run a campaign in Amethyst, how it takes different some examples of larger campaign arcs. There's some examples of campaign arcs you can have, story events, and then specific side quests. These are very quick little side quests you can introduce into your game. They're not really modules; they're just basically guides on how to do things. This is the module. This is the Taking of Proto-Cherico, another fantastic, really Amethyst-inspired illustration. Another great one, that's Behemoth, which is something we've never had an illustration for. So there we have a Behemoth in all of its glory. And this is a really, really big adventure. It is presented as more of a campaign guide. It does have a big dungeon map, but it doesn't handhold the GM. So this is definitely more an advanced game where I don't go into huge detail, but there is still a lot of story text, a lot of stuff to read off. And the module, the actual map, in case you're wondering, I wonder why that Battlesworn image looks a little fuzzy. I'll fix that. When we get to the map, you'll notice it's a spaceship. That's right, we've got a spaceship. It's not really heavily inspired from Expedition to Barrier Peaks, but I'm not gonna lie. Whether to say there's some inspiration, maybe it's not a complete ripoff, but I think there's some inspiration there. So this is the spaceship. By the way, real huge fans of my work, going back all the way to my Serena Dawn Spaceport, will recognize this map as being based off of a schematic that I made for the Sulaco in my Alien Fusion game. So in case you're wondering, yes, that does look familiar. Then you'd be right for those 3 or 4 people that are watching this video that remember that. And we go into each individual map. We have a couple of monsters, most of them reprints from the monster chapter, but there are a few others like the Cropster and the Combine and the Mech Tech, the Sparring Robot, and so forth. So we go into details on each of those. So we zoom up on all the maps. And that's basically it. We have the conclusion and then a much larger story segment that ends it up. And that's it. 453 with the cover is 454 pages. Big index, big contents. We put a lot of work into those. There isn't as much an index for this book because it's so much setting based. If it was rule based, you'd see a lot more. And then the contents at the front. So the back cover hasn't been formulated yet, but that will get done soon. And once that back cover gets printed, we'll do bookmarks, and then factions will go up. And hopefully by the same time we'll have that done, I'll have the other final 2 chapters. So the plan still is to release 4th edition, 5th edition, 13th edition, and Pathfinder. All basically are on the same day. I probably can produce them all on the same day. So you guys will all get a whole bunch of books really quickly. Like I said, it's... I repeat this whole process, and it won't change. We will put out the 5th edition version, or all these versions, on PDF. We'll order prototypes for print on demand. Once that one's been cleared and we're happy with it, we will then release it for available, and then everyone who's bought the PDF can then buy the print on demand at cost if you so desire. So that's going to be the release schedule. So we should be a 100% released. I'm going to express the print on demand so that we can hopefully get some copies in my hand before the end of April. But the PDF should be in your guys' hands probably in the next 2 weeks. So this is it, folks. We're winding down this almost 5-year-old Kickstarter. Thank you for all your patience, and I'm glad you had a chance to look through this book. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below. If like and subscribe and all that stuff. I won't do a walkthrough video of the other ones because it'll just be variations on a theme. I might do one where I go through all the other versions and we'll walk through some of the specific rule changes. But like I said, it's going to seem monotonous after a while because unlike the core book, we didn't want to make these books very different because it would take us a lot longer to try to give them each a unique voice. We did with the core book. So, like I said, it's one of those things where I have no regrets with that. I think it is better to do it that way. I don't want people to have to get all the books to find all the unique and original content in each one. But like I said, that can't be helped. The 4th edition and 13th age versions have some content. that 5th edition lacks, and there's something in the 5th edition one that the 13th Age version lacks. But that's primarily because of rules, not setting. When it comes to setting, there's no new nation in one book that the other books don't have. I've also made instructions that when we do the Fate Core and 13 and Savage World, that same thing applies. Those books may be smaller because those books are very rules light. So yeah, that's it, folks. That's our March update. I will see you guys in a week, probably with a bigger update, which is going to detail the distribution of the final books. All right, guys. See you later. Bye.